Coming up on 10 years since the release of Lost in the Dream, the War on Drugs' third album saw the indie rockers finding unexpected mainstream success when all components of their sound finally came together to reach full potential, striking the perfect balance between classic rock and americana, dipped in the soundscapes of indie and shoegaze, and with a sprinkle of krautrock. Lost in the Dream took the world by storm and went on to become one of the most critically acclaimed albums of the year. Equivalent to the likes of Bruce Springsteen and Tom Petty, it's also an album that seems destined to be blasted out of your car stereo while going on a road trip through the heartland USA, evoking feelings of the open road, endless scenery, and new horizons. But behind the album's thumping beats, blazing guitar solos and fuzzy textures hide frontman Adam Granduciel's ghosts of depression, anxiety and paranoia. And it turns out Lost in the Dream represents as much a mental road trip as a physical one. The War on Drugs songwriter and bandleader Adam Granduciel took an interest in music at an early age. Growing up in Dover, Massachusetts, his parents' knowledge of rock and roll stretched only as far as the Traveling Wilburys and Roy Orbison, so the future frontman had to resort to discovering music on his own. He states hearing British psychedelic duo Spacemen 3 to be one of his first major musical discoveries. The trippy, distorted music of Jay Spaceman and Sonic Boom would later become an important influence in shaping the sound of the War on Drugs. Granduciel eventually left his hometown of limited opportunities in search of a musical community and the American dream. With only a guitar, a box of happy brownies, and 20 of his favorite records, he first moved cross-country to California and then again to Philadelphia. In Philly, he finally found the like-minded people he was hungering for, most notably local musician Kurt Weill. Both obsessed with Bob Dylan, they bonded over geeky guitar oddities such as alternate tunings and the positioning of the capo. Granduciel joined Weill's band, the Violators, and when he finally got a band together himself, Weill returned the favor, kickstarting the most inspiring and creative period in his life. The War on Drugs' first studio album, Wagon Wheel Blues, was released in 2008, with the duo playing most instruments as well as handling the production. But merely being rich in inspiration sadly doesn't pay the bills, and the life of a struggling musician involved doing many odd jobs, including bouncing and being a Turkish carpet salesman. Thanks to the love of music, Granduciel admirably kept up this lifestyle of the starving artist for a whole 10 years before finally catching his big break. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. After Wagon Wheel, Kurt Weill stepped down to focus solely on his own band, and he would of course go on to have a successful career on his own, hitting a high water mark with his album Waking on a Pretty Days. Meanwhile, Granduciel grinded on, and 2011 saw the release of the band's sophomore release, Slave Ambient. Definitely a more cohesive album than their last. It includes highlights such as Come to the City, Your Love Is Calling My Name, and Baby Missiles. Gaining positive reviews, the band's higher potential is definitely felt throughout the album. The band was also able to tour more extensively than before. It was the experience of returning from tour that would end up playing a major role in the band's future. A deeply personal album, Lost in the Dream was born during a period of heavy distress for Granduciel. Going through a breakup and struggling to adapt to normal life after heavy touring, he experienced rough bouts of paranoia, depression and disembodiment. Suddenly finding himself in the house he had lived in for 10 years, all alone, having weird thoughts, feeling very nervous, anxious, isolated. These troublesome emotions are to be found all over Lost in the Dream. Granduciel's lyrics painting vivid images of wasted dreams, being frozen in time, and hearts that just don't beat the same anymore. Though the lyrics might lean heavily on themes such as separation, impermanence, and things coming to a halt, The music, on the contrary, is thumping, pounding, and ever moving forward, constantly twisting and turning and changing gear, sometimes very repetitive, though never boring, and always asking for attention, like an old grinding car cruising the open road. Take the first song, Under the Pressure, a staggering exercise in rhythm, building and building for almost 5 minutes before finally reaching an ecstatic climax, only to our surprise make a U-turn and change into a 3-minute ambient outro drenched in a haze of reverb, saxophone drones and echoing guitars. Pretty bold choices for a single, but oh man did it work. Track number 4, An Ocean in Between the Waves, sees an equally impressive rhythm section keep in perfect time. And like Under the Pressure, it's structured around just 2 chords repetitively building up to a climax. At its core, very reminiscent of something you might hear from the Waterboys, one of the band's major influences. Take This Is the Sea for example. The power of the 2-chord song isn't to be underestimated, and Granduciel obviously knows this. Halfway in, having mostly cruised at a fast and steady pace, the music shifts gears and slows down. We get a mellow instrumental interlude, and the lyrics also change at this point, becoming slightly more bright, with highlights such as the strikingly beautiful Eyes to the Wind and the upbeat Burning, talking about not having lost it all and dreaming of starting up again. The album finally concludes with In Reverse, marking an end to Granduciel's mental road trip, from literally having been under the pressure to accepting that life has its course and that in the end, it is what it is.
And out of mind you disappear, 'cause I know you can't be found. Maybe living on a dark side.
Yeah, it was definitely worse when I made Lost in the Dream. That was kind of like the peak of feeling completely just completely not myself, And then over the years, I think it's one of those things you accept as being a part of your life instead of something that you're trying to not have anymore. You come to an understanding that it's not something you didn't have and then you had and you're trying to get rid of. It's like, oh, it was always a part of me. Then it was really bad, but then I learned. Then I accepted that. So now it's just a matter of existing with it and not letting it kind of dominate. So it's just like living with it to the point where you kind of understand when it's rearing its head,
Well, the old cliché that the greatest art is born from a place of suffering rings true once again. Lost in the Dream was a critical and commercial success and went on to do amazing things for Granduciel and the band. It landed them a 2-album deal with Atlantic, their subsequent releases being met with equal praise, including well-deservingly winning the Grammy for Best Rock Album. Though Lost in the Dream still stands as my personal favorite, and in my opinion a contender for Album of the Decade. Every time I start my car, it's just begging to be listened to. But in the end, Lost in the Dream feels like the perfect road trip album. Not only because it lends itself perfectly to a car stereo, but because it feels like embarking on a journey inwards. And thanks to Granduciel's deliberate vagueness and figurative lyrics, the album becomes less about his personal experiences and more about how we, the listener, can apply the music to our own lives, which I think is why it resonated with so many people. Lost in the Dream is ultimately a lesson in coming to terms with impermanence and learning to enjoy the ride, because you never know when it's going to end. And at the end of the day, the road trip is more about the journey than the destination.